Honorable members, prayers. Almighty God, we beseech thee to look with favor upon this Parliament of the Republic of Ghana. Grant that it may perform its high duty as in thy sight. Give divine guidance to the President of the Republic. Endow members of Parliament and ministers of state with discernment and vision, integrity and courage, that through the effort, the labors of government, this land and people may be well and truly served, and thy good purposes for the common human life be realized in our midst. Amen. O God, grant us a vision of our country, fair as it might be, a country of righteousness, where none shall wrong his neighbor, a country of plenty, where evil and poverty shall be done away with, a country of brotherhood, where all success shall be founded on service, and honor shall be given to the deserving, a country of peace, where government shall rest on the will of the people and the love for the common good. Bless the efforts of those who struggle to make this vision a living reality. Inspire and strengthen our people that they may give time, thought, and sacrifice to speed the day of the coming beauty of Ghana and Africa. Amen. Item 2, correction of votes and proceedings. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. In the absence of any corrections, the votes and proceedings Wednesday, 24 January, are hereby admitted as true record of proceedings. Thank you. Urgent question, item 3. Which stands in the name of the Honorable Member for Adapu. to the Honorable Minister for Railway Development. Honorable Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, ordinarily, the urgent question must be taken ahead of the ordinary questions. I just want to plead that we allow for the ordinary questions standing in the name of the Honorable Ladi Ayi Ayamba, the member for Proceedings, to be asked first. The Minister responsible for Gender, Children and Social Protection has been with us since 9:30, and she is to attend Cabinet meeting. So if we could allow her to answer those questions. Then thereafter, the urgent question to be asked.
Any objection? Honorable Minister for Gender, if you kindly take the relevant seat. Honorable Majority Leader.
Speaker, I put in an application for the Minister for Gender, and I think you've granted that. So yes, she could
answer. Yes, granted. Yes, yes, that's why.
Just about hesitant. I'll be back.
Thank you very much. Honorable Ladi Ayamba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask the Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection whether homes for the elderly have geriatrics, how many each, where they were trained, and if there are caretakers in such and in each home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Minister.
Good morning to this august house, and I want to wish you a happy new year. To answer the question, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection is poised to see to the fulfillment of the MPP government's pledge to the people of Ghana to build a fair and inclusive society which ensures that all citizens share in the country's wealth and prosperity through the establishment of a well-funded and functioning welfare system which addresses the needs of the weak, marginalized, vulnerable, and socially excluded. In terms of policy, in view of this, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry has developed several policies aimed at promoting and protecting the rights of the vulnerable and excluded in our society. These include the Child and Family Welfare Policy, the Human Trafficking Act, the Disability Act, the National Gender Policy, Aging and Social Protection Policies, among others. The Ministry is also working on the accompanying legislative frameworks to facilitate the implementation of these policies, such as the Aging Bill and the Affirmative Action Bill, while identifying and bridging policy gaps in areas such as streetism. To this end, the Ministry is developing a policy framework and strategic plan to bring an end to streetism and the Kaya phenomena within the next 5 years. Mr. Speaker, the aging policy was formulated in 2010 to mainstream aging into national development. An aging bill is being developed in collaboration with the Attorney General's Department and other stakeholders to facilitate the implementation of the policy. Several initiatives have been undertaken to implement the policy, including celebration of Senior Citizens Day on 1st July, Acquisition of the Freedom Pass is aimed at facilitating access to social services, including the NHIS and free bus rides. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry has moved away from institutional care, placing emphasis on daycare facilities and safe places for the aged. There are no national nursing homes, apart from one home for the destitute at Bekwai, with 15 staff managing the facility. The Ministry will close down all witches' camps and put the productive aged poor to work through startups and skills training through the LEAP Cash Plus. The question that was asked said whether homes for the elderly have geriatrics. I want to believe that the Honorable Member of Parliament for Pusiga meant geriatricians, and that in Ghana we only have 2 geriatric doctors. Daycare centers for the aged, therefore, do not have geriatric specialists attached to them. Both the aging policy and medium-term plan of the Ministry aims at advocating for the training of geriatric doctors to serve Ghana's aging population. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, from the response of the Minister, under the question at paragraph 6 of her response, she states that the Ministry has moved away from institutional care, placing emphasis on daycare facilities and safe places for the aged. Could the Minister kindly tell us how many facilities there are and where they are located? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Inasmuch as we are moving away, we still have the one. We are into stakeholder discussions to be able to organize more for the nation. Thank you very much.
Honourable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, much as I appreciate the fact that there are only 2 geriatric doctors in the country, and the Ministry, from the response of the Minister, is planning to train some more. She has mentioned in her response that we have only one home at Bekwai with 15 staff managing the facility. Have you put in place any measure to ensure that one or the 2 doctors could visit the facility from time to time to give support to the inmates? Thank you.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable lady's intervention is noted, and we will take it into consideration.
Honourable Amabua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think the earlier question was asking the Minister whether he had put any measures in place to address the issue that was raised. I think in answering my question, you can also address that. But the other question I have was whether the Minister has any statistics on the level of neglect of the elderly, whether it's getting worse or it's getting better across the country.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have not yet done any such study, and so we will be embarking on it, and that data will be provided. With the issue of the doctors, I don't have the information of what they do. That's why I said that we will take it on board. Thank you.
Honorable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The minister mentioned in paragraph 6 that the ministry will close down all witches' camps. I would like to know the plans that exist to ensure the safety of the women, because integrating them in society may expose them to further harm. Thank you.
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Recent reports on alleged witches being burnt is harrowing and disturbing. And so the issue of reintegrating is of serious concern to the ministry. We have visited the Gambaga witches camp, and we've put some of them on the leap. And with the new leap, what we intend is that those who can be reintegrated, the various discussions between the community and the alleged witches will continue to go on. However, some of them don't want to go back to their communities because they feel that anytime something bad happens in the community, Mr. Speaker, they are the first to be accused. If somebody's child dies or there's any mishap. And so because of that, we intend with the new leap to provide the productive ones with skills training, and wherever they want to stay, we will support them with the productive inclusion to be able to live on their own. The whole idea is their well-being, and if they don't feel safe enough to stay in their original homes, then we would have to help them to resettle. Thank you very much.
Question *258.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask the Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection what measures the ministry has put in place to ensure that the women and children already living on the streets of urban areas get accommodation and social amenities. Thank you.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The categories of women and children in the streets include hawkers, kayaye, commercial workers, persons with disabilities and their attendants, girls of school-going age, the destitute, foreign families, often women and children, and persons with mental health problems. Ongoing programs, Mr. Speaker, apart from the development of policies and legislative frameworks, the ministry has also been promoting their productive inclusion into Ghanaian society. In 2016, 400 Kayaye were trained in secretarial skills, catering, hairdressing, beads, hat making, and repairs of mobile phones, and some of them have been gainfully employed. There are arrangements to train and employ about 1,000 more in garments manufacturing sector and another 1,000 in hairdressing this year. The second phase of LEAP Cash Plus focuses on productive inclusion and will therefore provide seed capital for caregivers of orphans and vulnerable children existing on the LEAP. In February 2017, the ministry held a Kayaye conference to discuss issues pertaining to their welfare and also celebrated Mother's Day with them through dialogue. The ministry will with support from UNFPA, runs reproductive health workshops for Kayaye at 3 market centers, namely Okaishi, Kaswa, and Medina markets, where they are provided health education, breast cancer screening, and sensitization on domestic violence. Mr. Speaker, the ministry is working feverishly towards the MPP government's manifesto promise of shelters for those without accommodation, including women and children. Inasmuch as we are providing shelters for the Kayaye, we want to reiterate that it doesn't mean that we want to encourage them to stay in Accra or any of the major cities. However, we have to consider their human rights. And so we are working with the National Board for Small-Scale Industries and other private sector agencies to provide them with skills training. To this end, the ministry has received several proposals from the private sector for public-private partnerships aimed at providing high-rise, low-cost, and affordable shelter for the poor and socially excluded, especially our women and children. In the interim, a few government shelters have been identified for refurbishment because they are in poor conditions, and offers received from the private sector with proposals for joint management arrangements for private shelters will also go on. For the way forward, Mr. Speaker, in order to comprehensively deal with the issue of streetism and the Kayaye menace, the ministry has recently launched an Operation Get Off the Streets Now for a Better Life campaign, which is aimed at mapping and creating a database of these groups to ascertain their numbers and characteristics with the aim of designing tailor-made programs to address the varied causes of their challenges. The program will entail advocacy and sensitization at the community level for all children of school-going age to be in school, integration of children of school-going age into the school system, reintegration with families with psychological support, adult literacy, skills training, entrepreneurship development, financial literacy, and enhanced access to financial services, linkages with local and export markets through women's fairs and exchange programs. Mr. Speaker, the ministry will continue to link up Kayaye to employment opportunities in the hotel, catering, and garment industries, promote 30% quotas for women in flagship programs such as Planting for Food and Jobs, One Village, One Dam, allocation of 50% of Maslow funding to women, and 5% of the District Assembly Common Fund to persons with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, in order to ensure that beneficiaries of these schemes do not relapse into poverty, robust monitoring and evaluation systems will be put in place to monitor the progress of beneficiaries and generate feedback to better cater to this group and sustain initiatives for their inclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, from the response of the Minister on paragraph 2, the Minister states that 400 Kayaye were trained in 2016. Can the Minister tell us how many more Kayaye were trained in 2017, in what areas, and if they have been gainfully employed?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For 2017, we did not train any Kayaye. We did not have the funds, and so we will be doing the training of 2,000 Kayaye this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the Minister has been candid in that response. Mr. Speaker, from the response of the Minister under paragraph 5, how many persons will the ministry support to live in the low-cost, affordable shelters? How much will it cost? And has the ministry budgeted for this activity?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as indicated, we are having stakeholder meetings, and so the cost has not yet been given. As and when that is given, we will let you know. We have a series of stakeholder meetings to deliberate on the execution and implementation. And indeed, we'll be coming up with a KIA policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under paragraph 6, the minister mentions shelters identified for the KIA. Can she tell us how many they are, where they are located, how much it will cost to refurbish each one, and if there is a budget to this?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have shelters run with private individuals. I cannot give the numbers right now, but in every region, we intend to ensure that we have safe places for the KIA. And I cannot give you the cost either. Thank you very much.
Honourable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to know from the Honourable Minister, I'd like to know where the proposed garment factories will be sited, because paragraph 2 states that there are arrangements to train and employ 1,000 more in garment manufacturing. I'd like to know where the manufacturing factories are located or will be located, and when these girls will be employed in such factories.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We've gone into agreement with an NGO that has 1,000 machines, and they're going to start the identification of the girls through the mapping program that I mentioned earlier on. And so the mapping is supposed to take about 3 months to complete. And that will give you the date of when we will start engaging them to learn alternative skills in the garment industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to refer the Minister to paragraph 4 of her answer. With your permission, I would like to quote. Mr. Speaker, the Minister is working feverishly towards the MPP government's manifesto promise of shelters for those without accommodation, including women and children. Mr. Speaker, all of us, we are aware that our streets are flooded with beggars, and some spend the night on the streets. So whilst awaiting the implementation of the MPP's manifesto by providing the shelter, what measures the ministry is putting in place to take off all the children from our street so that there will be sanity on the streets? Thank you very much.
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as indicated earlier, we have launched the Operation Get Off the Street campaign, and we have identified the hotspots nationwide, as well as the various shelters. We need to look at the numbers, and that's what the mapping will provide, to be able to let us know how many will need to be reintegrated with their families, and then how many will need shelter. And the shelters that are around, will they be able to accommodate the numbers? And so through the mapping and the various discussions we are having with the various shelters, we'll be able to provide that information when we finish the data collection. The issue of families living on the street is another issue that we address in the Operation Get Off the Street. Some of them are foreigners. And so we are engaging Ministry of Foreign Affairs to find out whether we can send them back. If we can't, then in discussions, they will also have to be part of the shelters that we are talking about. Some of the children run away from home. Some of them are orphans. And in discussions, we'll be able to find out whether there was abuse at home. Is that why they ran away? I met a young boy who had actually run away from home from Togo, and he walked and hitchhiked his way to Accra. Another boy comes from Ashama. Why is he on the streets? He said he didn't have a uniform. So we were able to locate his family, reintegrate him back, only for him to run back after 2 months. He was brought back to me. I asked him why. He said somebody stole his uniform. And so you have quite a number of recalcitrant children. And it's not something that you can just finish in one day. We have a 5-year plan to be able to work out, because these are sensitive areas. Why does a child keep running away from home back onto the street? And it's not good enough to just send them back. You need to have discussions with their families and reorient their minds, the psychological issues. And so we have a 5-year program to be able to organize all these things and eradicate streetism. It doesn't mean that they will no longer go back, but we will also talk a lot about the fact that it's a crime to actually be on the streets. And we're also in discussions with the various media houses to educate our people that begging is an offense, and that those of us who give to beggars must not continue to do that. And those of us who allow the young boys to clean the windscreens must also stop. Those of us who buy from the hawkers must stop. It's demand and supply. So we need to do a lot of advocacy, and that's what we are on. Thank you very much.
Honorable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to know from the Minister, in answering Honorable Ayamba's question about shelters. Honorable Ayamba generalized a question about shelters, but I want to be specific, because in paragraph 4 of her answer, she says, in as much as we are providing shelters for the Kayaye, does not mean that we want to encourage them to stay in Accra. Can she be specific where the shelters are in Accra? Thank you for the opportunity.
Honorable Minister, where are the shelters?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't bring the figures and the data, so on another day, another occasion, I will bring the list of the shelters and where you can find them. Thank you very much. And as well as the locations, I will bring them.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Ayariga, the last question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The question was asked about the location of the garment factories. Just to indicate that there are garment factories at Ajabeng, not far from the major scene of the Kayaye activity, which the minister can take advantage of. But the question is, Kayaye itself is a dehumanizing exercise of porters carrying load from market stalls to where vehicles are parked. So the problem is a problem of the design of our markets. That is why there are no Kayayes at Accra Mall. In your Kayaye policy that you mentioned that government will develop, do you intend to end once and for all the dehumanizing practice of Kayaye by advocating, demanding, and compelling that local government authorities redesign their markets to remove the necessity of porterage of the goods from the stalls to where the vehicles are parked?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, no human being should be a donkey, basically. And the dehumanizing nature of the existence of the Kayaye is at the core of everything that I do personally, given the fact that I also come from the northern part of this country. And so because of that, and through the various dialogues that we have held with them, one, we have actually gotten the Kwame Nkrumah University to design a trolley that can navigate our markets. We've also gotten gratis to do another variation, and it is still not meeting the needs of our markets, because even carrying the load is hazardous to their health. And so we are in talks with the gratis and with Kwame Nkrumah University, and as well as some private partners, to be able to design a trolley that will be robust and manageable in our markets, so that we create jobs for them in the area of pottery. If you want to be a potter, then with the assemblies, you can be engaged as a potter. And also, for those of them who are of school-going age, the mapping will indicate, and then we will send them to school. Those who can be part of the garment industry or hairdressing or any skill that they are interested in, we intend, through the new LEAP, the Cash Plus, to move them away from the handouts and give them a hand up, so that we give them skills training and also support them to start up their activities. We're also in talks with the AGI and with civil aviation, as well as tourism, so that the hotel industry can engage some of them, as well as the food processing industry. Indeed, some of the 400 that we trained have been gainfully employed in some of these, I don't want to mention their names, in the hotel industry and in the fast food industry. I also propose that for various activities in the area of catering for various ministries, we have trained the KIA in catering. And so instead of getting food delivered from somewhere else, it's an avenue for the KIA to have jobs and funds for themselves. So we have a holistic program to end KIA in the next 5 years. It is a solid program, and we are going to come with a policy. And we have a KIA module for the YEA. For as long as there is a KIA, then the work of the Minister for Gender is not over. Thank you very much.
Minority leadership.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to know from the Minister. She said they are providing shelters for KIAs. She went further to say that they've even received proposals. To this end, the Minister has received several proposals from private sector for public-private partnership aimed at providing high-rise, low-cost and affordable shelter for the poor and socially excluded, especially women and children. Are you sure that all those people you have enumerated in your answer are going to benefit from this public-private partnership high-rising building you are going to build?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, before I answer that, there was a question about the markets. The issue of modernizing the markets has come up, and we had a national conference with market women and the KIA last year. And so we will be having talks with the various district assemblies to look at our markets and how we can modernize them. In the area of your question, only as sure as the day will begin and the night will come. The thing about ensuring that social protection is meaningful to people's lives is the continuous dialogue and ensuring that we respond to the emerging issues. We have a human rights issue, and the rains are going to come soon, and it's been going on for quite a while. And so, we must find a solution. And that solution, government does not have the money. And that is why we are engaging the private sector to be able to have accommodation that is affordable. Currently, the Kayaye, some are paying 10 cedis a month for where they stay, which is even very deplorable. We tried to look at last year getting the various tertiary institutions that were on holidays to accommodate them. But the fear was that if you put them there and the students come back, they might refuse to go back to where they were. And so we need to have a sustainable answer. And that is getting the high rises, which will allow us to have more rooms. And that we'll be able to manage with the district assemblies. The ministry does not implement. And so we will work through the district assemblies and the private partnerships in the area of the accommodation for the Kayaye. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question was, are you sure that all those women and socially excluded you've mentioned in your answer are going to benefit from these facilities that you are talking about? That was the simple answer, yes or no answer I wanted, before I proceed with the second question as leadership.
Honorable Minister, look into a crystal ball and answer the question.
Mr. Speaker, I thought I answered by telling you that it's as sure as the day will come and the night will come. That is surety enough, because day always comes and night comes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in mentioning the socially excluded here, an answer, let me quote it to you. Mr. Speaker, the categories of women and children in the street include hawkers, Kayayis, commercial sex workers, PWDs, and their attendants, girls of school-going age, the destitute, foreign families, and so on and so on. Are you sure? You are saying sure. So you are going to build these high-rising buildings for the commercial workers too? Is that what you are telling us?
Honorable, that is not a question. That is not. Honorable Minister, will you please be comfortable in your seat?
This is Ghana we are talking about. This very blessed nation that has achieved so much. The leader in democracy. It is possible. It's done in other jurisdictions. And we need to have big dreams for our people, especially the very vulnerable. And I used to live in England, and I was able to stay in places like that. And I know that this country can do better. And that is where we are heading, to ensure that we improve upon the lives of the very vulnerable people. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Minister is entitled to have the audacity of hope, as per Obama. Majority leadership in the question. Thank you very much. That will bring us to the end of question time. Honorable Minister, thank you very much for attending to the House and answering questions. Item listed for statements at the commencement of public business. I'm afraid I was looking for Honorable Okudieto Ablakwa this morning to discuss some aspects of a pending statement. We will discuss that and admit it tomorrow if possible. Yes, it has been the majority leader. Honorable Majority Leader, is the Honorable Minister ready for the
Speaker, yes.
The
Minister has sent the Deputy Minister. for Railways to stand in for him to answer the question. And because it's just one question, we could allow for that. Then maybe after that, there is a motion in the name of the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. Because he has to join his colleagues on the special committee, we may also allow him to move his motion and then retreat to join ranks with his colleagues. And for the time being, we can deal with the question standing in the name of the Minister for Railways Development.
So in effect, the Honorable Deputy Minister is in the House to answer the question.
That is so, Mr. Speaker.
On behalf of the Minister, Honorable Minority Leader, any difficulty?
Mr. Speaker, no objection.
Well, Honorable Minister, you may please take the relevant seat. The owner of the question, Honorable Member for Adaklu, you may please ask the question.
Right, Honorable Speaker. Permit me to rise in the position of Honorable Fifi Kwete because my console is regularly defective. If it's your wish, I can ask the question standing in the place of Honorable Fifi Kwete. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to ask the Minister for Railway Development steps being taken by the Ministry to ensure safety on the country's rail network.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the focus of the government on the rail sector by the creation of the Ministry of Railways Development presents a unique opportunity to address the various challenges affecting the rail operations, including safety. Mr. Speaker, out of a total of 947 kilometers length of rail, only 120 kilometers was operational in 2017. And that is from Takoradi to Nsuta on the Western Line, and from Accra to Tema and Accra to Nsawam on the Eastern Line. Currently, with the exception of freight services from Nsuta to Takoradi for the haulage of manganese, the remaining sections of the rail network is not operational due to poor state of the tracks. Mr. Speaker, to ensure passenger comfort and safety, over 50 track workers have been engaged by the Ghana Railway Company Limited for the rehabilitation of the Accra and Nsawam section of the line, that's the Eastern Line. Ghana Railway Company Limited is in the process of procuring ballast and treated wooden sleepers to be used in the rehabilitation works to bring the line back to good operating standards. Similarly, on the Western Line, Ghana Railway Company Limited has intensified the ongoing rehabilitation of the track from Nsuta to Tapa. It is anticipated that the ongoing track rehabilitation works on the two lines will be completed by the first quarter of 2018 for efficient train operations to commence. Mr. Speaker, the Ghana Railway Development Authority, which is the regulator, in collaboration with the Ghana Railway Company Limited, are in the process of installing additional level crossing mechanisms at major railroad intersections to improve pedestrian and vehicular safety. Mr. Speaker, the old coaches and locomotives are also being refurbished in order to ensure passenger safety before the reintroduction of passenger service. Spare parts for the coaches have also been procured, and currently 15 coaches are being refurbished. Mr. Speaker, we will not reintroduce the service until the tracks and coaches are declared safe by the government regulator, which is the Ghana Railway Development Authority. The Railway Act 2008 Act 779 has several provisions in relation to the safety of operations of railway services. The Ministry has directed the GRDA, which is the regulator, as a matter of urgency, to build its capacity, to exercise its full power and authority as a regulator of the sector, to enable it to ensure the safety of all aspects of rail services. Mr. Speaker, safety involves the removal of risk, and safety in the railway system is dependent on the people involved in its operations, such as train drivers, the dispatchers, inspectors, as well as the equipment. In this regard, there is an ongoing exercise to retool and retrain the workers of Ghana Railway Company Limited to improve their capacity and build a good safety culture. Plans are far advanced to collaborate with the University of Mines and Technology, UMAT, in this regard. Mr. Speaker, as a policy, all new railway constructions will be standard gauge with engineering designs that has standards that ensures a high level of safety. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I wish to assure this August House that the Ministry and its implementing agencies will not relent on its efforts at ensuring the revamping of this railway sector for a safe and secure transportation of goods and services in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Right, Honourable Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. May I ask the Minister to take a look at the paragraph 4 downwards of his answer. You notice that you've linked much of the safety to defective lines, level crossing, and the nature of the coaches. Will you say that the accidents we've had so far were mainly due to lack of maintenance of the lines, the nature of the coaches, and the fact that we don't have level crossing mechanisms at some of the places? In other words, they were the responsibility of the operator, Ghana Railway Company Limited. So somebody can say the accident happened because of lack of maintenance. Will you agree to that?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would agree with the honourable member that partly due to the lack of maintenance, but also because of the current state of the lines. We're dealing with lines that were constructed somewhere in the 1800s, 1898 to about 1913. And currently, rail lines have moved from narrow gauges to standard gauge. We are looking at a wider gauge, which is like 4'8", as opposed to the previous gauges that we have, 3'6". So, Mr. Speaker, maintenance is an issue, but then the alignment is also another issue that we have to deal with. The lines we had and we currently use, about 13% of the lines are still operational for manganese transportation. We are looking at these lines that were purposely built for transportation of minerals, not so much for the use of passengers. So the alignments are not fit for purpose. And currently we are trying to realign. So we have lines that will be fit for transportation of people and goods. So we're going to do realignments in the new construction. We're going to avoid sharp curves and also use current technology to avoid the kind of derailments that the honourable member is talking about. So I agree with you, but then also the lines are obsolete, and for that matter, beyond maintenance, we have to realign the lines. Thank you very much.
Can I ask the Minister to tell us whether his ministry, through the agencies, do have regular professional development courses in safety for your staff, especially those working on tracks and in coaches? Do you have a culture where regularly your staff that work on the lines and those who work in the coaches have continuous professional development in safety, and if this record is available to be checked.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, not the ministry staff, but the staff of GRCL, the Ghana Railway Company Limited, and that is why I mentioned in the answer that we have an understanding with UMAT, University of Mines and Technology, to retrain them on the current technology that we have. So we are doing that for the Ghana Railway Company Limited. Thank you.
My last question, Mr. Speaker. May I ask the Minister to tell us, how does the public get the understanding of the safety regime you expect around your installations, especially your railway lines and stations? How do you go about educating the public on the safety regime around your railway installations of rail lines and railway stations? If I'm approaching a rail line, how do I know what to do? If I'm approaching a station or I'm at a station, how do I get to know what I'm supposed to do to ensure I'm part of the safety regime?
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are currently engaging communities where we have new constructions. And for instance, the line between Tem and Akosombo, we've engaged the various communities along the route of 85 kilometers to get them to understand that the new rails that are coming on board are faster than the previous ones. So you have rails, trains that are going to travel at the speed of about 120 kilometers per hour, as against what we have currently, which is about 30 kilometers. So community engagements are ongoing, and we recently had one major engagement at Achimoto Station where we had a derailment. So we are engaging the communities, and we'll make sure that people get to understand that they have to know that trains can be dangerous, especially in our system where there's so much encroachment. We're dealing with very close dwellings to the rails, and we're working on that, so we make sure that we educate them. We are also dealing with fencing and embankments. We're also going to employ different grade separations, so we are going to avoid level crossings. In the past, we have mostly level crossings. We are going to put in grade separations so that people don't get close to the trains. Thank you very much.
Leadership, any questions? Minority leadership, majority leadership. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for attending to the House and answering our questions. Honorable members, commencement of public business. Item 5, motion. Chairman of the committee. Item number 5. Chair.
Speaker, we can now deal with item listed as number 5.
We cannot proceed with items 5 and 6. Can we proceed with 7?
Speaker, item number 5. Item number 5.
Item number 5.
That is all.
Yes, that's what I've announced. Chairman of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to move that this Honorable House adopt the report of the Public Accounts Committee on the performance audit report of the Auditor General on the implementation of local content in oil and gas sector in Ghana. Mr. Speaker, in so doing, I present your committee's reports. Mr. Speaker, I will read some portions like the background and then the recommendation of the committee. Mr. Speaker, following the discovery of oil and gas in commercial quantities in Ghana, there was a need to develop local capacity to allow indigenous Ghanaians and Ghanaian businesses participate in the emerging oil and gas industry in an effort to ensure that the country maximizes its benefit. from the oil discovery, the Ghana Local Content and Local Participation Bill 2013 was passed into law. The Act aims at ensuring that Ghanaians are prioritized in terms of employment in the petroleum industry so as to derive the maximum benefit from the country's resources. The law is also to ensure that Ghana's petroleum resources benefit Ghanaians while allowing foreign oil companies to optimize the returns on their investment. To operationalize the Act, a legislative instrument, Allied 2204, was promulgated. The Allied 2204 seeks to promote the maximization of value addition and job creation through the use of local expertise, goods and services, business and financing in the petroleum industry value chain, and their retention in the country. Develop local capacities in the petroleum industry value chain through education, skills transfer, and expertise development, transfer of technology and know-how, and active research and development programs. Achieve the maximum local employment level and in-country spending for the provision of goods and services in the petroleum industry value chain. Increase the capacity and international competitiveness of domestic businesses. To further ensure the active participation of local entities in the oil and gas sector, the law also requires a contractor, subcontractor, licensee, GMPC, and other allied entity carrying out a petroleum activity to ensure that local content is a component of the petroleum activities engaged in, and to ensure that indigenous Ghanaian companies are given first preference in the grant of a petroleum right or a license. The Allied further requires all petroleum agreements reserve at least 5% equity participation to an indigenous Ghanaian company in addition to GMPC's carried and participating interests. The implementation of the above initiatives has been vested in the state institutions and agencies responsible for regulation and operation in the oil and gas sector, namely the Ministry of Petroleum at the time, the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, and the Petroleum Commission. 3 years after the implementation of the Act, the Auditor General found it necessary, in the interest of the Republic, to conduct a performance audit to determine the degree of attainment of the objectives of the local content in the oil and gas sector. So, Speaker, the committee made a number of observations, such as institutional framework for local content, the relationship between the Commission and other state agencies, skills and capacity of local companies, ensuring Ghanaians acquire skills in demand in the oil and gas industry, and also monitoring and evaluation of local content. Mr. Speaker, the committee, in conclusion, the Auditor General was generally satisfied with the legal and regulatory regimes in place to ensure the full implementation of local content in the oil and gas sector. The Auditor General also expressed satisfaction about the establishment of the required institutions and the monitoring and evaluation mechanism in place to ensure that OICs comply with the local content rules and regulations in the country. The committee, having carefully examined the report, is also satisfied with the planned activities and regulatory framework in place to improve Ghana's local content and local participation in the oil and gas sector. The committee noted that the agency's tasks to implement the program are also on course. The program outline of the Commission, when properly implemented, will further contribute to an improved local content regime and local participation in the sector. The committee therefore recommends to the House to adopt its report on the performance audit report of the Auditor General on the implementation of local content in the oil and gas sector in Ghana, in accordance with Order 165 of the Standing Orders of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, respectfully submitted.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman. Honorable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to second the motion ably moved by my chairman. In doing so, I would like to make a few observations. Mr. Speaker, while the Auditor General was generally satisfied with the work of the Petroleum Commission, which has responsibility to ensure the implementation of the local content legislation, there were a few observations that I believe has come to the attention of the House. First of all, the Auditor General noted that the companies, most of the Ghanaian companies lack the capacity to compete with the international companies when it comes to procurement of petroleum equipment. They also lack the funds to again compete with the international companies when it comes to procurement of this capital. So it was recommended that the LI, which set up a local content fund, should be implemented as soon as possible to enable the local companies to engage, to source funds to be competitive. It was also noted by the auditors that whilst huge sums of money were spent in training Ghanaian graduates, it looks like the amounts were used in training management level personnel rather than the technical engineering staff that were needed. Therefore, clearly there was a mismatch. While the industry needed technical and engineers with practical experience, most of the funds that were earmarked to build capacity in the industry actually went to jobs that were not available. So we recommend that going forward, monies are really directed. We're happy to note that the Commission has actually identified these things, and it was in collaboration with the technical and universities and the polytechnics to train personnel that are relevant for the industry. Again, Mr. Speaker, there were also plans by the Commission to actually place some of our graduates and engineers in an internship program in collaboration with the international oil companies. And we noted that over 150 Ghanaian engineers.
The First Deputy Speaker will take the chair. Honorable, we may continue.
Over 100 Ghanaian graduates, 150 Ghanaian graduates have actually been trained and are being placed in the various upstream oil companies. There was also a program to train vocational, technical and vocational skilled people so that they will be at the lower end of the industry. And this is being done in collaboration with the international oil companies and the relevant universities. All in all, there were also collaboration between the Petroleum Commission and various stakeholders like the Immigration Service, Port and Harbour Authority, and other stakeholders to make sure that jobs that can be done by Ghanaians and the jobs that we have the expertise will not go to expatriates. All in all, Mr. Speaker, I think that the Commission has done well within the short period that they have operated to make sure that jobs are going to Ghanaians. Ghanaian companies are participating in the purchase and supply of materials needed for the equipment, and we need to urge the ministry to continue to support them to do that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I I support the motion of this viewer.
Honorable Member for.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of the report. As a member of the Public Accounts Committee, Mr. Speaker, it is very clear that the committee certainly has taken its responsibilities very seriously. And obviously, the report that we are considering certainly is new in as far as the history of the oil and gas industry is concerned. Rightly so, as a people, we have decided that in the exploration of our God-given resources, we should make room and to encourage the full participation of the citizens of this country. And it is within that context that I just want to raise two issues. Mr. Speaker, if you look at page 7 of the report under 6.2, skills and capacity of local companies, it is very clear that whilst efforts are being made to ensure that...
Honourable Member, do you have a different report? Because in my report, there's
6.3.
Very well.
Skills and capacity of local companies. Very well, thank you for the correction. But Mr. Speaker, the point I'm seeking to make is that whilst efforts are being made to ensure that our Ghanaian businesses and producers take advantage of the local content component of the oil and gas industry, it was determined, rightly so, that some of the local companies tend to even import the produce that they are expected to supply to the companies engaged in this industry. In many ways, this certainly does not benefit, or if you like, give effect to the purposes for which we are advocating for the full participation of indigenous Ghanaians. So I would want to use this opportunity to encourage players in that industry who really seek to maximize the local content opportunity to do what is right by making sure that they procure and supply from the local terrain the food items, at least, needed by these companies for the upkeep of their staff. Mr. Speaker, the last point I want to make before I take my seat is also a determination which has been made around a discrimination that has to do with the waiver on taxes on some petroleum products, where if you look at page 8, for example, it talks about the chief executive lamenting of the current practice where most indigenous companies are not enjoying a waiver in the import of other petroleum products from outside the country, which would enhance their work, but rather the international oil companies seem to be enjoying those waivers. Now, I think going on, these are some matters that we believe the ministry and parliament has to take a second look at so that we do not shortchange our local players in the oil and gas industry. With these few words, I want to thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Before you resume your seat, the report does not determine who grants the tax waiver. Can you guide us?
Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at page 8, I believe the last paragraph, where it says that the committee is of the view that reliance on importation by local firms as against in-country production and fabrication could derail the laudable objective of the local content policy by shifting most of the profits in the industry to foreign entities operating outside the shores of Ghana. Further, the restrictions of tax waivers on the importation of petroleum equipment to only IOCs is discriminatory and does not promote the competitiveness of local firms to bid for the supply of such equipment. This is the reference I'm making to Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Maybe the chairman later will guide us, because to the best of my knowledge, it's only this House that can grant tax waivers. So who is administering the tax waivers and discriminating against Ghanaian companies. I think the report should have explored this part, and I want to be addressed on that one. Very well. As honorable member for Secondly, Takrade, sorry. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy the audit report has been released and we are discussing. Mr. Speaker, if you take LI 2204, one of the major focus has to do with local content and how it is applied. And the Petroleum Commission has that mandate to implement the LI. If this report tells us that they've not been able to do the necessary audits, then we ask ourselves, to what extent have we also been able to implement the local content LI? Mr. Speaker, currently as we speak, we know that 5 years after local content, the passage of the local content, goods and services of the oil companies should have a 50% local Ghanaian participation, or those goods and services are supposed to be sourced locally in this country. To what extent have we been able to achieve those figures? Mr. Speaker, it shows that even though we passed this in 2013, we as a country have not made enough strides in achieving the objectives for which the regulation was passed. Mr. Speaker, if we take the report, we have not been given indication as to all the areas that we're supposed to apply the law and to what extent have we been able to achieve it. And therefore, naturally, if members are here, we will never be able to take a firm decision as to what needs to be done to make sure local content is actually working in this country. And I believe that this report is not good enough. They might have to bring an addendum so that we can actually know exactly how far we've been able to do with the law that we passed in this House. Mr. Speaker, secondly, if you take 6.6, paragraph 2, it says, the Commission is unbundling contracts to make it possible for local companies to participate and to bid for such contracts. Mr. Speaker, I ask myself, how many times have these contracts in these oil companies been advertised publicly? Because the resource they are using to pay for these contracts belongs to this country. And therefore, I believe that it is time that for every single contract they put out there, they advertise it so that it is transparent, and after the contract has been awarded, the full reports are published. Because consistently, a lot of people have been complaining to me that they bid, and the contract always go to the same people. Mr. Speaker, this is one area we need to fix. If we are not able to fix and make sure it is transparent enough for other people to be able to bid, Mr. Speaker, the oil money will all be going offshore, and Ghanaian companies will not. In fact, a lot of the companies that we call Ghanaian companies and that are winning the contract are usually foreign companies who have just registered in Ghana and taken our money away. Mr. Speaker, this is not fair, and I believe that it is time this country set up and make sure it is indigenous, proper indigenous Ghanaians that are winning this contract. Because all the major technical things, they do them outside. The little that Ghanaians can also get, indigenous Ghanaians can also get, Mr. Speaker, is becoming a problem. It is not fair. It is just not fair, and I believe that we need to look at it. Mr. Speaker,
yes.
Going forward.
Honorable Minister, hold on. Yes, Honorable Member for Bia West. Bia East, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can read Sharia Ikobotre speaking, but the voice is a male voice and the picture is a male. I'm confused.
You are out of order.
I thought you were going to assist in the debate.
Mr. Speaker, if you take if you take paragraph 4, paragraph 4 of 6.6, it says, line 4, the last statement says, he indicates that the petroleum sector is highly technical and a little mistake or negligence could cause severe devastating consequences. Hence, they need to give extensive practical training to the young professionals to make them employable in the sector. Mr. Speaker, anytime we want to help a Ghanaian or give a Ghanaian an opportunity, we bring a lot of caveats. We have universities that are training our young men and women. Are we saying that the universities are not training them well after going through school for 4 years? Is that what we are saying? I believe not. I believe that universities are doing very well. And if the oil companies have problems, they should have the necessary industrial academic relationships so that the young men can be trained within the 4 years that they are there so they can do their job. We are giving every excuse why Ghanaians can do it, but others can't do it. Mr. Speaker, it's not proper. And I believe that we need to look at this critically and make sure it is done. Last but not least has to do with local content fund. Mr. Speaker, and I believe that when the Petroleum Exploration and Production Bill came to Parliament, I was one of the few people that supported that we needed to make the local content fund very big so that Ghanaians can draw from it and do bigger projects. Mr. Speaker, people borrow money outside at 2%, 1%, 3%. People borrow money here at our banks and they are paying 30%. Naturally, Mr. Speaker, even if we give them an additional 10% markup for their bids, they will still not be competitive. They will just not be competitive. And therefore, I find it extremely difficult that as of now, Petroleum Commission has not been able to set up the fund further to deepen the woes of Ghanaians and also give more opportunities to foreigners to take away what dearly belongs to us in terms of local content. Mr. Speaker, with these few words, thank you very much for the opportunity to add my voice to this.
The Honourable Former Minister for Petroleum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute. Mr. Speaker, the Act 2201-04, the Local Content Act, the LI, as has been stated earlier, is passed to prioritize interests of Ghanaians in terms of employment and making sure that they are in the forefront of the industry. Mr. Speaker, when we started, I think we had 3 key objectives. How do we manage our revenue from oil? We passed EMP, the Exploration Management Act, the Oil Management Act, to ensure that that is in place. Critically, the issue of how Ghanaians will take over the industry is what drove us in really fighting to pass the Local Content Act. Mr. Speaker, as has been indicated, the Petroleum Commission, which is the custodian of this act, has made a lot of progress on some of the guidelines that they were expected to be in place. It has been stated, for example, that the joint venture guideline has been in place. It has been stated that tender guidelines has also been put in place. But, Mr. Speaker, clearly one of the challenges and some of the issues that have been raised has to do with the outstanding guidelines that has not been implemented. We still have a lot of work to do in terms of what is required by the LI. The Petroleum Commission is to come up with the research and development guidelines. It has not been in place. It has to come out with the financial services guideline. It's not in place. Procurement and bid evaluation guidelines is not in place. The Petroleum Commission registration and eligibility guidelines is still not in place. Technology transfer guidelines is still not in place. Mr. Speaker, I think that we take the opportunity to urge the Petroleum Commission through the ministry to fast-track these guidelines. It is only when these are in place that we will empower Ghanaians in a real way. I think, Mr. Speaker, if you recall, we also worked very hard to pass Act 919. In that act, Mr. Speaker, the implementation of the Local Content Fund was critical. We have no reason at this point not to implement the local content fund. That is the only way that we can really leverage the local Ghanaians in competing for contracts. And the reason we are seeing that disparity is because it is very simply difficult for Ghanaians to raise the required funding to compete. We believe that the local content fund, which basically take from the foreign companies and support local Ghanaians, is a key to addressing that issue. Mr. Speaker, the other important point, and I think this is a point that has been made, is the issue of unbundling contracts. Mr. Speaker, when you give up contracts in huge amounts, 300 million, you don't expect Ghanaian to win. And so the fight has always been to unbundle this contract in small lots in a way that can allow a lot of Ghanaian companies to really have an opportunity to participate in the industry. The Petroleum Commission, I know, has come up with programs to try to do that. They've kind of ways of working where they've insisted, and they've made some progress in that area. But, Mr. Speaker, a lot of work needs to be done in that aspect as well. I think that it's also very important to be very realistic and practical in going forward, in dealing with how we can get Ghanaians to participate. One of the excuses has always been used is experience. Experience. Mr. Speaker, there will be a tender, and all these companies will come with their suitcases and just bid the contract, win, finish, make profit, and leave. And I believe that one of the ministerial directives that is in place that has to be implemented, and that is not enough. We must look at the track record of these companies, how long they've been here, and whether they are committed to staying in the country. It has to be one of the bases in awarding these contracts to them. Other than that, Mr. Speaker, 20 years of oil production for a particular field will last, and we will not see the footprints. I believe that if we compare our steps in the oil and gas industry in a short period of time, and look at the things we've put in place, 919, local content, the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, these are very critical. It is time for us to really get down to implementing and giving effect to the intentions that we have in these acts. I believe one critical one that has to be done quickly this year has to do with local content fund. Mr. Speaker, I think the auditor, the report is very, very apt. I believe that in the coming years, we will be able to get a lot of details on the progress being made in terms of the implementation. But this is a very good starting point. I thank you for the opportunity.
Another member from the group. Oh, leadership, you will get your chance. So. Yes, Ngo Pram Pram, I'll come to.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker. I want to comment on the committee's report on the performance audit report of the Auditor General on the implementation of local content in the oil and gas sector of Ghana. Mr. Speaker, one of the key issues for me when we met with the Commission at the committee sitting had to do with the issue of the relationship between the Commission and other state enterprises. Chief amongst them was the Ghana Immigration Service, our national security, and the Ghana Navy. And looking at the role that these state institutions play in enforcing the work of the Commission. We have a local content law that is clear on the number of Ghanaians that should be operating within the sector. I had cause to challenge the Commission on the data that they have provided as the number of Ghanaians who are working in the industry. Because, Mr. Speaker, we have had reports with evidence of other nationals from the West African sub-region who are posing as Ghanaians and are working and are being captured as Ghanaians working in the oil sector. And this is being reported as us meeting our local content requirements, whereas majority of these so-called Ghanaians are not truly Ghanaians. And so we asked them that what amount of work has the Commission done to verify the data that is coming from some of these service providers in the oil sector of Ghanaians who they claim are Ghanaians. Have they done checks with through national security, through the immigration service, the birth and death registry, to the passport office to be sure that these holders of Ghanaian passports and claiming to be Ghanaian citizens are truly and really Ghanaian citizens. Because, Mr. Speaker, my senior Honorable Benjamin Kodo just mentioned one of the major problems that we realized and is captured here in paragraph 6.4. He says that he financed 2 people to go to Aberdeen and London to go and study oil and gas law and oil and gas management. And that is a major flaw with most of the funding that has been put aside for capacity building in our country over the past 7 to 8 years that we have been doing capacity building. Mr. Speaker, our oil and gas sector does not have a demand for oil and gas law masters holders, oil and gas management or a degree masters holders. There is a real need for geophysicists. There is a real need for substructure engineers, petrochemical engineers. These are the real needs we have. But when you take the list of beneficiaries of our capacity building schemes to Aberdeen and Norway and the Londons, Dublin and all of those cities, you realize that we've sent almost 70 to 80% of capacity building to go and do oil and gas management. After they finish doing the oil and gas management, they come back and manage unemployment in Ghana because they're unemployed, because there is really no need for them. Even oil and gas accountants, how many oil and gas accountants do we need in our sector at the moment?
Honorable Whole West, do you have a point of order? Whole Central, sorry. Do you have a point of order?
Yes. Mr. Speaker, he made reference to me that I have trained oil and gas lawyers and oil and gas management people, and it is useless. Oh, I think this is what you need. Mr. Speaker, those areas are critical to the oil industry, and we needed those people. But the problem is that when the foreign oil companies come, they take their own people and leave. No, the order is that they are very useful, and you are saying they are not very useful. They are very, very useful, and I want him to address his mind to the fact that we need managers, accountants, and lawyers in the oil industry.
Very well. Please conclude your contribution.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Speaker. Right Honourable Speaker, nobody has said that we will not need them. But if as a country we are investing our taxpayers' money or oil revenues into capacity building, let us ask ourselves proportionately, what number of engineers and geophysicists do we need in that sector as against managers and lawyers? How many oil and gas lawyers do we need in that sector as against the current prevalence of geophysicists? These are the real issues that we should be asking ourselves. That what is our priority as a country, and where are we putting our money? Why is it that many of the oil and gas management master's degree holders we have, who we have sponsored, are walking the streets of Accra unemployed? And you have Ghanaians who are geophysicists who are being recruited from the universities today. So
yes, Honourable Deputy Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I am even more.
No, don't shout at him.
I am even more concerned with the honourable member's mannerisms. Mr. Speaker, he keeps pointing his finger in your face.
Oh, it's very serious.
It is very serious. As if he's fighting you, Mr. Speaker. So the honourable member.
Unparliamentary.
It is unparliamentary.
That is unparliamentary.
It is unparliamentary, Mr. Speaker. So I would urge Mr. Speaker to direct that he can equally make his point without aggressively pointing at Mr. Speaker. He's causing fear and panic.
Honourable Leader, thank you for your protection, but I'm yet to read any part of our standing orders dealing with gestures, hand or head gestures. So if any comes to my attention, I use that to rule on the house. But please, you have 2 minutes to wind up.
Thank you. And advisedly, I put my hands behind my back.
Oh, wow. Your hands are tied.
The deputy leader is tying my hands. But, Mr. Speaker, let me state that the Commission has made the point known to us that they are making strenuous efforts to liaise with the world of academia here in Ghana. I still believe that Ghana is a preferred destination, and we can actually make education a major earner for ourselves in this country and in this sub-region. And so it was welcoming to hear the Commission say that they started engaging my alma mater, the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, the Regional Maritime University, and other stakeholder universities, technical institutions, to build capacity within Ghana. It will be cheaper for the state to train these individuals locally. And we have fine Ghanaian engineers from across the world that we can attract if we put in place the right systems and support mechanisms in our tertiary institutions. Right, Honorable Speaker, I believe that as a country, we need to get our priorities right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to this statement.
I'll come to the leaders. We've said enough about the same things. Yes, Honorable Majority Leadership.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity given to us to contribute to the motion. Mr. Speaker, I will just go straight to the point. And Mr. Speaker, on page 8, that's paragraph 6.4, with your permission, I quote, ensuring Ghanaians acquire skills in the mine and in the oil and gas industry. The Auditor General established in his audit that there is currently a shortage of relevant skills in the industry, although there is a high rate of unemployment among graduate engineers and technicians due to lack of practical experience in the oil and gas sector, upstream operations. Mr. Speaker, I believe this is a critical issue. And as a country, I believe we must tackle this issue holistically. Laws will be made. And it is sad that, Mr. Speaker, in this day and time, we are all crying of unemployment and ways of combating unemployment to make sure that we create jobs for the teeming youth. And Mr. Speaker, not that the people are not there, the people are there, but the needed skills, simply because, Mr. Speaker, there is a serious gap between academia and industry. And it is unfortunate that people were trained. What need assessment was done to make sure that these are the specific skills that are needed before those who were trained were sent for training. Mr. Speaker, if you want to make a serious considerations, the disparity between the fees that were paid by the people that we need, the skills that are needed, might not even be up to those that we train. And Mr. Speaker, I believe it is about time that the next time that the nation needs certain skills, they said nationwide exercise was embarked upon, and about 150 graduates were recruited and trained. Mr. Speaker, how come that you embark upon a nationwide exercise, you select 150 graduates, and we are still talking of shortage of the needed skills that we needed? Mr. Speaker, it's about time, and that is why this House passed the Technical Universities Bill, turning the Polytechnic into technical universities. And Mr. Speaker, I think now that certain things are coming out, we must strengthen the training capacities of our technical universities so that we will not keep on churning out the human, adding to the unemployment basket without getting when it comes to certain skills that we need, we leave them here and we go and bring foreigners to come and be doing same jobs. Mr. Speaker, this is a critical issue. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we must find a way of bridging the gap between the academia and the industry. We used to have Kwame University of Science and Technology. Now, when you go there, the humanities are more than even the engineering courses. And it is practiced everywhere, simply because training people in the humanities, like business administrations and those things, the universities get money. But the state needs certain specific needs. And this is what industry needs. And this is why Parliament will keep on passing those local content laws. Mr. Speaker, if no matter what kind of local content laws that we pass, we need engineers who can dive into the sea to go and fix the boat and not under the sea. The nation is going to pay your school fees to go and study to come and help the nation. You say you want to be outside to be managing. Managing what? You don't want to dive into the sea.
Honorable, but those from Banda, they are afraid of the sea. They are afraid of water.
Rightly so, Mr. Speaker, and that is the problem. So clearly, I think the earlier we came together to open everything up, I don't think that even when the nationwide coverage that we are talking of, to select 150 people to go for this scholarship, Mr. Speaker, this information was publicly given to everybody. I don't think that I even got the information. There might be certain engineers who could have been able to dive and go under the sea to fix the boat and all, who didn't have the information. So going forward, holistically, Mr. Speaker, that's why I'm calling for national exercise, whereby the next time we know that we want to solve this issue, let's put everything aside, advertise it. You may get certain intelligent students from somewhere who want to deny their self-comfort and be able to go and learn and study, do all those kind of courses to come and solve this problem. Mr. Speaker, I know there is a lot. The report is well written, and the committee did a very good job. It has come out with some of those weaknesses, and I don't think the next time that the next report that will be brought to this House on this same issue of local competency, those things that we are seeing will still be contained in it. Once it has come out, we must find a way of solving it. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Yeah. Honorable Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to comment on the report of the Public Accounts Committee that is before the House, and to, Mr. Speaker, state that many have enumerated the importance of having a transparent procurement system in the sector of in the energy sector, Mr. Speaker, and the petroleum sector as well. Mr. Speaker, it is very true that many of our local contractors who bid for these contracts don't have the financial capacity or even to some extent the technical capacity to undertake some of these contracts should they be given these contracts, Mr. Speaker. But I think it is in the interest of the people of this country and the need for us to also build the capacity of these locals to be able to compete equally with our foreign partners who come to bid for these contracts. Mr. Speaker, that is why the local content law was passed, so that a sector of or a section of these contracts in this energy sector would be reserved for our local contractors. Mr. Speaker, and in the report, it is so clear. It is so clear on page 7, paragraph 6.3, the third paragraph. It says that the chief executive of the commission explained that the commission conducted a value chain analysis to identify job areas where local firms can effectively compete. Based on the outcome of the analysis, the Commission reserved goods and services for indigenous companies, Mr. Speaker. So we cannot hide behind the fact that when it comes to the actual project work, which we call in procurement as works, it's so huge and financially involving that our locals cannot compete. But a starting point for us as a country, which we passed it as law in the local content bill law, was to enable our contractors to start on a lower basis, which is bidding for contracts in the area of goods and services. But Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, in the area of services, for instance, where they provide catering services and other labor services for these companies, Mr. Speaker, you still go there and you see foreigners. Cleaning services, you go there and you see foreigners. Mr. Speaker, so if we have made law for ourselves to reserve a portion for our own, we need to implement it effectively for us to see the needed results. But if we leave the foreigners to also veer into that restricted area, then they will be taking away everything from us, Mr. Speaker. But we are endowed with the natural resources. And we believe that especially the communities where these resources are should see the direct benefits or impact in their lives. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that we should protect the goods and services aspect that we've reserved for our locals. Mr. Speaker, again, I would want to say that when it comes to capacity of our local companies, again, in the energy sector or the petroleum sector, financial muscle is a very important part of it. We have been told in the report that even when Ghanaian contractors are able to win some of these contracts, they have realized that they end up importing many of these things from our foreign partners or foreign countries, Mr. Speaker. And this we can see on page 8 of the report, that they actually, Mr. Speaker, it's paragraph 4 on page 8, which says the current practice, the Chief Executive lamented that the current practice where indigenous companies win contracts, they prefer to import items when contracts are awarded to them instead of establishing facilities to undertake production in the country. Mr. Speaker, that is why we should all commend His Excellency the President for introducing this one factory, one district, one factory project. Mr. Speaker, if we have factories locally producing, it will reduce the number of our imports that come in, and we can reserve our foreign exchange. Mr. Speaker, it is the report that is saying so. The report is saying that even when locals are able to win these contracts, we don't have the industries to be able to supply. So that is why we should have industries built in Ghana. That is why the one district, one factory is most important. Mr. Speaker, it will end up creating jobs for our people. For our youth, our teeming youth out there, we will get our factories in there. Our contractors will be able to build the capacity of supplying when the need arises, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think that in the area of procurement in the energy sector, we are being told that certain guidelines ought to be drafted and come to aid them to be able to set out the needed procedures that ought to occur in the procurement process. But, Mr. Speaker, whether or not there's a guideline, Mr. Speaker, on the hierarchy of statutes, guidelines, I believe, is at the bottom, or it's not even recognized. Mr. Speaker, this Honorable House has passed a law. We have a legislative instrument also backing it. We cannot hide behind a common guideline and say because we don't have a guideline for bidding and evaluation in the energy sector, that is why we are seeing what we are seeing. Mr. Speaker, it is a matter of committing ourselves to implement these laws that we have made and not made for the shelves only. Mr. Speaker, on this note, I would want to urge the Honourable House to adopt this report of the Auditor General, and I believe that moving forward, the findings of the report, findings of the Auditor General will guide us in the future in order that we don't commit similar mistakes. Mr. Speaker, on this note, I thank you.
Honorable Chairman of the Committee, I have issues that I want you to address. First, you have raised an issue of tax waivers. Some people getting tax waivers, others not getting it, and the losers are the Ghanaian companies. I'm not aware that any such requests for tax waivers have been brought before this House. So who is granting those tax waivers and why? Two, Chairman, hold on. Two, what the report suggests is that companies in the petroleum sector are refusing to abide by the law we have made. I'm not seeing any recommendation that some people be sanctioned. There is nowhere in this world that you breach the rules, at least some fines. If there were Ghanaian companies operating in any of the countries of those operating in our fields, and they failed to meet the local content rules, the Petroleum Authority would slap fines on them. We should not admit the excuses they are giving. They should find the Ghanaians to do the work. So we should not admit the excuses and say that they say there's lack of capacity. Lack of capacity to supply water, to clean the premises. Or are they giving contracts for cleaning and things to foreign companies and suggesting that there are lack of capacity? Supply of vegetables. Those all things are found there. So for me, the report should address those things and recommend that the Petroleum Commission should slap fines on them. Otherwise, they will continue to give excuses as long as we will also accept that we will have capacity in that respect. Maybe you want to address the House on why there are no sanctions against either the Commission or the operators in oil fields.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I think that on your second issue, basically it's an advice to the committee and probably to the Commission, because that is why the Commission is in place, which is a regulator of these companies that are operating in that sector. So any sanction for violating all the laws or any of the laws that we have under the sector should be applied by the Commission. That is what the Petroleum Commission is there. But I take your advice that if the Commission is not doing it, the committee should also recommend for action to be taken. I take that advice. But then on the first one, the report is talking about the local companies not benefiting from these tax waivers. First of all, the local companies are not supposed to import because they need to produce the goods here to feed. That is what we call it, local content. But we also know that there are some input that definitely will be imported by them. But the reason why there is this discrimination is that the OICs, the International Oil Company, who have the who operate in the sector like tallow and the rest, are, because of the agreement that we have with them, the petroleum agreement that we have with them, which Parliament actually passed, has an element that allows them to have tax waivers. So that is the point from which the tax waiver is coming for these OICs.
The agreement cover things that are available here? And to the best of my knowledge, the things that are not available, which are critical for the operation, that we exempted them from bringing in, that should not be extended to cover bringing in apples and so on.
Mr. Speaker, if you read the agreement, if you read the report, it's talking about equipment. The major equipment that are imported by these companies are tax exempt. But when the local companies that have the subcontract are also importing some equipment to do their work, they are not covered by the waiver. That is what the discrimination is coming from. But it's a lesson that when we are looking at anything of this nature again, we know how to handle it. So, Mr. Speaker, these are the areas that we have. Then, also on the issue about what the Honourable Member for Takoradi raised about that the report, to him, the report is not a good report. Mr. Speaker, simply because data was not provided on what is the level of the attainment of the objectives of the Commission. I don't think that that should make the report to be a bad report. Mr. Speaker, we are issuing a report on the report of the Auditor General. And so the content of the report of the Auditor General is what we work on after we have gotten more explanation and information from the Petroleum Commission and the Ministry. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that the member should avert himself to that angle, that it is the Auditor General report on which we are issuing our report based on what we have found out as we discuss the report. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank members for their contribution on this motion, and I pray that we all adopt the report as recommended by the committee. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, honourable members. After the debate, the question is all in favour of the motion, say aye. All against, say no. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Item number 5. No, item number 6. Chairman of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to move that this Honourable House adopts the report of the Public Accounts Committee on the performance audit report of the Auditor General on the disposal of government vehicles by the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and Ghana Health Service. Mr. Speaker, I present your committee's report and ask that the Hansard capture the entire report as having been read once I read the background. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Food and Agriculture is a government agency responsible for the development of and growth of the agricultural sector in Ghana, whereas the Ghana Health Service, on the other hand, is established under Act 525 of 1996 to provide and manage comprehensive and accessible health services with special emphasis on primary health care to the entire nation in accordance with the national policy. In order to realize their broad objectives, the government allocates funds to these agencies for the purchase of vehicles and other equipment necessary for the effective formulation and implementation of their policies and programs. The vehicles and equipment acquired usually get aged and become obsolete, necessitating their disposal, especially so when the continuous usage is proven to be inefficient and counterproductive to the purpose for which they were acquired. So, Speaker, the Public Procurement Act of 2003, as 663, as well as other laws and regulations passed by the Parliament of Ghana, set out the processes by which these obsolete and unserviceable vehicles and equipment are to be disposed of. Some institutions over the years have taken the disposal of vehicles and equipment but fail to observe the laid down rules, and this has on several occasions led to public outcry on either suspected unfair practices or alleged loss of revenue to the state. The above situations motivated the Auditor General to conduct performance audit on the disposal of government vehicles by the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and Ghana Health Service between 2011 and 2013. So the purpose of the audit was to determine whether the MOFA and the Ghana Health Service identified and assessed vehicles earmarked for disposal in a transparent manner. It was also to find out whether the two institutions ensured that the auction process was competitive and that all proceeds from the disposal were duly accounted for within the required time frame. Mr. Speaker, the committee made observations on the delay in accounting for the auction proceeds, the lack of transparency in the auction process by the auctioneer, lack of proper financial management system for handling proceeds of the auction sales, violation of the relevant legislations of auctions, and a number of observations. So, Mr. Speaker, I go to the recommendations. Mr. Speaker, for Ministry of Food and Agriculture, the committee made the following observations. The first one is unprofessional conduct of the auctioneer, Mr. Alexander Ajay. Considering the unprofessional conduct of the auctioneer, Mr. Alexander Ajay, in the process of the auction sale, the committee recommends to the Ghana Auctioneers Registration Board to suspend his license and re-examine his competence at the end of the suspension term before granting him license to operate in Ghana. Furthermore, the Auditor General should initiate the process to recover the undeserved commission paid to him in the process, and if practicable, charge interest on the period he held the money and any other relevant money outside the stipulated time given by law. The Auditor General should evaluate the transport, accommodation, and other incidental costs incurred by Mr. Alexander Ajay in traveling around the country to conduct auction for the ministry and submit same to the Ministry of Food and Agriculture to be paid to Mr. Alexander Ajay for the expenses he incurred on behalf of the ministry. The committee recommends also to the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and Ghana Revenue Authority to ensure that Mr. Alexander Ajay, with the company name Alesmat, meets all his tax obligations under the transaction and file his tax returns accordingly and report to the committee through the Auditor General. Mr. Speaker, under the Ghana Health Service, this observation, the recommendation is made by the committee. Non-payment of proceeds of auction vehicle by Shelter Mart. The committee recommends to Ghana Health Service to take steps, including legal action, if necessary, to retrieve the sum in the amount Ghana cedi 44,125 of auction proceeds under the custody of Mr. Felix Aduaju of Alesmat. The committee further recommends to the Auctioneers Registration Board to revoke the license of Shelter Mart and prevent him from practicing as an auctioneer in Ghana with immediate effect. Mr. Speaker, the committee also wishes to recommend to government to consider establishing an independent valuation board or authority to be responsible for the valuation of government vehicles and supervision of auction process in Ghana, instead of relying on the State Transport Corporation. The committee further recommends to the government to take a second look at the financial management system regarding the accounting for proceeds of auction sales. Conclusion. In conclusion, the committee recommends to the House to adopt its report on the performance audit report of the Auditor General on the disposal of government vehicles by the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and Ghana Health Service, and the recommendations made in accordance with Order 165 of the Standing Orders of Parliament of Ghana. Respectfully submitted, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to support the motion moved by my chairman. In doing so, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a few observations. The Speaker, going through the report of the Auditor General,
one cannot help but noticing that almost every law under the Oceaners Act and the Procurement Act has been abused. Mr. Speaker, there were situations where washing proceeds have not been paid at all into government chest. There were situations where delays of over 3 years have occurred in paying the proceeds into the government chest. There were situations where clearly vehicles have been valued very low. We notice situations where vehicles have been carried away while payment has not been effected. There were situations where virtually all the vehicles on auction have been sold to staff of the institutions involved. Mr. Speaker, when we look at the situation where auctions are carried out without any publication to give the public opportunity to participate, where staff allocate vehicles to themselves and just call the auctioneer to come and regularize the auction. All this, Mr. Speaker, were findings by the Auditor General. I think, in addition to the recommendation that we have made to the fact that it's about time we have an independent body that will be responsible, authority that will be responsible for carrying out the evaluation and auction of all government vehicles. Mr. Speaker, you notice that with just 2 institutions, all these infractions have taken place, and it's obvious that the government is losing a lot of revenue out of these vehicles that are auctioned at 1,000 cedis, 400 cedis, and 200 cedis, and the like. I think it's about time this responsibility is taken away from the government department institution and given to an independent body. I'm sure with professionalism, they will be able to even be paid for their existence. Mr. Speaker, we also noticed that auctioneers for various institutions are normally appointed by the Chief of Staff of the Office of the President. Therefore, most of the institutions will shirk responsibility when you question them about the conduct of the auctioneers, and they will say that, well, they were appointed by the Chief of Staff, so we cannot do anything about it. I think that we have to look at the situation where we are embedding the Chief of Staff with these things and lay the responsibility again on an institution that will be purposely set up to make sure that they take care of disposal of all government's assets. Mr. Speaker, with these few words, I rise to second the report and the motion. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to comment on the report before us. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the committee did some good job, but the recommendations, going through the report and listening to my colleague, he said some of the vehicles were shared among staff, and the auctioneer was just brought in to regularize it. And some of the vehicles, and in the report, Mr. Speaker, the staff of the ministry accepted the fact that there were infractions, they made mistakes, and they pleaded for leniency. The auctioneer also accepted that he also made mistakes and pleaded for leniency. But in their recommendation, they said that the auctioneer should be sanctioned. But they have let the staff of the ministry. What about that? Are we being fair? If it is not right, for the auctioneer to come and regularize what the ministry has also allocated to themselves, then it is also not right, to leave the ministry out and sanction the auctioneer alone. So I think that, and Mr. Speaker, I am very sure, though we don't have the details here, if we should go into details of which people did not pay, or the delays that arose in the payment, I am very, very pretty sure that it will be as a result of the fact that these vehicles that were, it will be as a result of the vehicles that were allocated to staff. Because I'm sure that anybody who comes from outside to come and purchase any of these vehicles will come prepared. It is the staff that were allocated the vehicles even before the auctioneer came in to regularize. That would, be keeping their money without paying. So, Mr. Chairman, I think that, yes, the report, we have got some good findings here, but the recommendation, I disagree. If we want to punish the auctioneer, let's punish the auctioneer, let's punish those at the ministry, especially the chief director who said, he should be, the chief director who is pleading for leniency and some clemency from them. I believe that both of them, the auctioneer also pleaded, and therefore, if we want to punish, let's punish all of them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Com.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to contribute to the debate. Mr. Speaker, I would like to restrict my contribution to the recommendation made in paragraph 90, the unprofessional conduct of Mr. Alexander J. I have also heard my colleague on the other side who just spoke before me. Mr. Speaker, if we look at the conduct of Mr. Alexander J, his own proficiency in his work is seriously suspect. He seemed to have no knowledge at all about the auction sales law, which I believe is his tool of practice. He had no knowledge, and if we should share the blame, he professes to be the auctioneer. And so we can proceed on the assumption that he knows the tools of his trade and the rules that govern his trade. So if you are just motivated by the financial rewards that you would make, and so somebody is doing something wrong and you are asked to come and just regularize it, I think your professional ethics should dictate to you that you should not go and glorify somebody's wrongdoing. Beyond that, when he was asked even about how he calculated his own percentage of the fees that he must receive, all he said was that he took 7%. Meanwhile, looking at it from the auction sales law position, he should have taken only about 3% because this was a government auction.
Honorables, guide me. These are two groups, the auctioneer, a private person, and the ministry with the chief director, who is the person paid to protect the public purse. What did they say also about the fees that are payable to the auctioneer? Did your committee veer into that? Did you investigate that?
Sorry, Mr. Speaker?
Did the committee investigate why the ministry, the chief director or the head of procurement, why they also agreed to the person taking far more than he was entitled to under the law?
Mr. Speaker, we did, but it appears to me that both the ministry or the people from the ministry or the chief director and his group, those who were involved in the auction, and the auctioneer were all at fault. They all didn't know the law. But we think that, or I think that since the auctioneer is the one who professes to know the law on that, and he has been licensed as such, the blame should be shed more on him than on the ministry, because he was required to know. And because of the way it was done, he only felt that, look, I'm only going to regularize somebody's misdeeds, if I should put it that way. So let me just go. After all, once I tell them that I am entitled to 7%, I just take it off, and that's it. In any case, looking at what happened, he even took the 7% before making the rest over to them. And I think that beyond, indeed, even his own language was suspect. And as far as I'm concerned, I think we should check Mr. Alexander J's competence well. But it goes beyond Mr. Alexander J. We also have to ask the processes leading to the grant of licenses to people to become auctioneers. Sometimes you hear, some people have just gone to write some exam from the Ministry of Interior, they have given them license. And you meet some of the auctioneers, the basic tool they are working with, they do not know the content. And I think that whilst dealing with the issues of Mr. Alex J and Shelter Mart, we must go beyond that and look at the processes, the competencies of people who ultimately get the license to practice as auctioneers in the country. Mr. Speaker, with these few words, I thank you for the opportunity.
Honourable Member for Wa Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also rise to contribute to the motion on the floor regarding the performance of the audit, a report of the Public Accounts Committee on the performance of the audit report of the Auditor General on the disposal of government vehicles by the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and the Ghana Health Services. Mr. Speaker, I have often felt very bad that there is a lot of pretense in how we respond to situations like this. This is not the first time I have seen that auctioneering is not done the proper way, and auctioneers have faulted. It has always been the case. I have seen situations where auctioneers will go to the point of auctioning and only one vehicle is auctioned out of 100 of them. I have had situations to call an auctioneer to complain why I went to buy an auction vehicle and was told that it was already sold. When we went to the spot and nothing was auctioned. The Speaker, I was told that I could be, the best thing for me was to have called the auctioneer earlier so that he would arrange the vehicle for me. It is all over in the country. It is how they do things. The wrong has become the norm. So this is just a clear example, and it's a tip of the iceberg of the many things that happen.
Honourable Member, hold on. Yes. Honourable Members, having regard to the state of business, I direct that we sit outside the regular sitting hours.
Thank you. Continue. So this is just a tip of the iceberg of how we auction vehicles in this country. There is a deliberate interference by political people, by influential people in society, significant individuals, and that makes it impossible for the auctioneer to do his work well. And he enjoys it because he gets a lot of perks out of it. And if such interferences don't come, he himself goes out of his way to request it, so he can gain out of it. There is often, and it is also shown in this report, that the procedures are often undermined. There's no transparency, wrong procedures are followed, individuals who are not supposed to gain out of it are the ones who sit at home and are given vehicles, allocated vehicles to, and etc., etc. And Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy that this report is recommending that the auctioneer, who circumvented all the processes and did everything he could to make sure the proper thing was not done, is to be sanctioned, or a recommendation is made for him to be sanctioned and his license withdrawn. This will be will be exemplary and will
form the basis upon which we tackle such issues. It's also going to vicariously influence the others who will possibly do the same thing. And I think that the report, to this extent, Mr. Speaker, is very, very, very good. The present situation, as observed by the Auditor General and also observed by the committee, should apply across the board. And I'm happy the Procurement Minister is here. And I suppose that the Minister should have been part of some of the resource people to tackle this issue. And once she's not there, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask that you direct her to find out what the previous auctioneers have done, whether they have followed the procedure, going into the future, how auctioneering should be done, so we can be confident that this report and what it contains is not just applicable to Ministry of Health and Ministry of Food and Agriculture alone, that going forward, there should be a framework, an existing framework, which is already part of the law, that should be followed by everybody. The Speaker, with these few words, I thank you.
Honourable Member for Sitakwama will be the last contribution before I come to the leaders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to look at page 5, the last paragraph, the committee's comments that the committee further observed that the inability of the ministry to tell exactly the location of the vehicles at the time of the auction. Mr. Speaker, this is very, very challenging for the ministry because they have the Directorate for Agriculture Mechanization Directorate, which is responsible for monitoring the location of all vehicles within the ministry. And for the Chief Director to come out that they cannot locate, find out where these vehicles were, Mr. Speaker, this is very, very amazing. And the committee should have taken this lightly. In fact, the Director for Agricultural Engineering Services should have been sanctioned. Because what is his job in the ministry? It is his responsibility to tell, to demonstrate where this vehicle.
Hold on. Honourable Leader, what's it?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague is speaking from the minority side. That clearly shows that he has crossed carpet. That's not his seat.
You're out of order. That is his seat.
He's not speaking from his seat.
That is his seat. You're out of order. Yes, one member continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My responsibility here is to monitor the activities of the minority. That's why I sit here.
Mr. Speaker, where's your seat? Your seat is the next one. Is that right? Remember, your seat is the one to your left. Is that right? Where you're sitting now, you moved one step to your right.
Mr. Speaker, yes, there's one idea here, and there's another idea here. So I can't swap. Mr. Speaker, on a more serious note, I am of the view that Director for Agri-Engineering should have been sanctioned before your committee to demonstrate why vehicles he is in charge of monitoring and evaluating could not be found. So besides that, there's a need for the ministry itself to allocate some of these unserviceable vehicles to the staff of the ministry. There are many vehicles across the country, and unfortunately, majority of the staff within the ministry don't have vehicles to do their monitoring activity, to visit farms and so forth. But to me, I've gone around, I've seen most of these vehicles are serviceable. I don't know the criteria they use to inform your committee that those vehicles were not serviceable. We will take a look, a stroll to the crop services directory. There are many vehicles there. Take a stroll to extension directory. There are many vehicles there. And yet, government each year have to spend huge sums of money buying new vehicles for the ministry. Honorable Speaker, there's a need for your committee, when they are presenting their report, I don't know if they took the opportunity to visit the sites or directories of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture. The next time they are doing that, they should take a trip to look at those directories from at the national level and also at the district level. On these few words, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Minority Leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to add my voice to the motion. And Mr. Speaker, there are a few things that I've observed from your committee's report. The first one has to do with the breaches of our laws. This House has passed 3 different laws. The first one is the Public Procurement Act, which has been amended, which has been breached. The second one has to do with the Auction Sales Act, which has also been breached by 2 parties. And the Financial Administration Regulation, which has been passed by this House, has also been breached. Your committee, in recommending, did not tell this House that when you breach a law, the sanctions that have been prescribed by those laws should be applied. But it came out to tell us that the parties who have breached the law should be sanctioned. I don't think that is a good job, Mr. Speaker. Whatever action that needs to be taken, it should be taken in accordance with our own law that has been breached, which was passed by this House. Mr. Speaker, the question I ask myself as I read through this committee's report is, how was the auctioneers procured? Were they just taken from the street to auction? Did they go through any procurement process so that there will be value for money for the consultant called the auctioneer? If it was not done, then the first and foremost, we must hold the Ghana Health Service accountable as well as the Ministry of Agriculture accountable. If the consultants were not procured properly, then it means the foundation of this whole auction has a problem. The second thing I've also not observed, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that in your committee's report, after they have prescribed all the sanctions, they have left the ministry and the various departments and agencies, they've left them and put all the blame, as my other colleague has said, on the auctioneers. There were 2 parties involved in this issue. The Ministry of Agriculture, as well as the Ghana Health Service, were all involved in this act. And these 2 people should also be hauled. They must also be sanctioned. What do we do to these people so that these infractions on our laws, we cannot continue, passing laws in this House, and the laws will just be, you just abuse the law, or you just decide that you do things your own way. We cannot continue like that. What kind of country are we governing? If we really want to do the right thing, then this House must be respected. If a law is passed by this House, it must be respected. Mr. Speaker, with these few words, I thank you.
Majority Leadership.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to comment on the report of the Auditor Generals as presented by the Public Accounts Committee on the disposal of government vehicles by the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and the Ghana Health Service. Mr. Speaker, from the report that has been presented by the committee, we're being told that there's been lack of transparency in the process of auctioning by the auctioneer. Mr. Speaker, it is not in doubt that this very act by officials of these two state institutions violated the Auctions Sales Act of 1989, PNDC Law 230. Mr. Speaker, this law sets out categorically when auctions are being done in the public institutions, how it ought to be done. Mr. Speaker, and if people are found to be infringing or violating the law, we need to invoke the proper sanctions that ought to be invoked. Mr. Speaker, the said law that I've quoted indicated that if an institution of a public nature intends to auction, first of all, it needs to be advertised in a widely read state newspaper. But we are being told that out of the 24 vehicles or items that were auctioned, only one of them was advertised. If you look on page 6 of the report, Mr. Speaker, it says that there was only one in the Volta region that was published on the 3rd and the 4th of July 2013. Mr. Speaker, why advertise for one which is in satisfaction or in fulfillment of your obligations under the law, and in the other 23 decide not to follow the law? Mr. Speaker, many people, including civil society, have raised the issue about...
Honorable Leader, even that, the day of the publication was just the day before the auction.
Mr. Speaker, that is so, which is also not the best practice of auctioning. Mr. Speaker, so I think that we ought to, many civil society as well as many legal practitioners have raised the issue about the findings of the Auditor General and the work of the Public Accounts Committee, and actually whether or not that invocation or of the constitutional provision to surcharge some of these wrongdoers is being invoked, or that indeed it is just a public talk. We do the report, and at the end of the day, it sits in our record. Mr. Speaker, I think that that is the reason why, thankfully, this House has passed the Special Prosecutor Bill. And Mr. Speaker, this law, I remember in the scope and in the functions or objectives of the law, some of the things that the Special Prosecutor would be prosecuting are offenses that are related to some of these practices which are conceived to be corrupt practices. Mr. Speaker, again in the report we are being told that the Public Procurement Act, and this is not the first time, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the Auditor General's reports over the years, about 80% of the findings of the Auditor General's findings are procurement breaches or procurement malpractices, Mr. Speaker. And that is why I think in the best wisdom of the government in drafting the Special Prosecutor Law, made it one of the offenses that, or the scope within which the Special Prosecutor would operate. It has stated specifically that offenses that are created under the Public Procurement Act, and Mr. Speaker, if you look at Section 93 of the Public Procurement Act 2003, Act 663, as amended by Act 914, Mr. Speaker, it spells out clearly, it has listed a number of actions that when you do as a public officer in the area of public procurement, which would be considered as an offense under the law. Mr. Speaker, if you don't follow the right procurement procedure, if contracts are given without the right transparency that is expected of them, these offenses are spelled out. They are long ones, Mr. Speaker. I think that the question that has been asked by many of my colleagues, including the last one, Honorable Bejra, which is that, what are we doing? What is the way forward? Mr. Speaker, I think I would borrow an adage that popularly goes, our daddy is coming, our daddy is coming, now daddy has arrived. Mr. Speaker, now we have the special prosecutor law, and it has stated specifically that some of the offenses that would be prosecuted by this independent special prosecutor would be offenses that are created under the Public Procurement Act, and also offenses that are conceived to be corrupt practices. Mr. Speaker, it is only an improvement in our democratic dispensation. It is only an improvement in an oversight function, as well as also our commitment to fighting corruption in this country. Because this thing has been sitting in the Auditor General's report for so many years, and we've been lambasted by many out there that after the Public Accounts Committee report, then what happens? Today, we know what happens. Some of these offenses qualify within the scope and ambit of the special prosecutor's function. And we believe that when he's properly brought before this House, we would decide whether or not indeed we would support the nomination by His Excellency the President. But I believe that we need that drastic step. We need that drastic measure in fighting corruption. And I think procurement malpractices or procurement offenses qualifies him under such malpractice. Mr. Speaker, on this note, I want to thank you for the opportunity and for the House to adopt the report. I thank you.
Honourable Majority Leader, I have an issue with the report. Certainly appears to be short in its recommendations. We have all observed that the public officials who either participated in the breaches or superintended the breaches, there are no recommendations about what to do with them. And the House appears not to be happy. We seem to think that, and if you don't agree with me, you can say so, we seem to think that the public officials in those ministries should also be recommended for sanction. I observed some of the things that have been observed by the committee, and I don't understand it. For example, they say it's a breach of financial discipline. There's no act called financial discipline, or there's no law called financial discipline. If it's a breach of the public financial administration regulation, we should say so. However, after we have observed that they have breached the rules, we don't make any recommendations. Are we entitled as a House, debating this committee, to ask them to go back or to amend the report ourselves and to recommend that the specific public officials be identified and be sanctioned? I'll seek your guide in this matter.
Speaker, I agree with you that there are too many infractions that have been committed by various people, the auctioneer, and indeed some public servants. I notice, Speaker, the fact that the auctioneer himself abused the processes of auction. It is strange to observe that, as the committee has indicated to us, that there was just one advertisement out of 24 auctions. And then even that one they had just 2 advertisements, one on the 3rd and one on the 4th. And then the auction then was done on the 4th, the very day of the second publication. That certainly is incongruous. Mr. Speaker, on the 23 other auctions, we are told there were reserve prices, and out of the 23, only one auction had prices higher than the reserve price itself. The Speaker, the committee informs us that they inform us about the professional incompetence of the auctioneer, as he himself appeared ignorant of the laws regulating his own profession. We have an auctioneer who admits that he decided to deduct 7% commission from the total proceeds on his own accord, and then paid the balance into the non-tax revenue account of the Bank of Ghana. Mr. Speaker, in the meantime, we are informed by the committee that beginning from that date that he took the money, he has not met his withholding tax obligations. Mr. Speaker, these are really serious matters. He has not filed his tax returns since 2013, including his own earnings in that transaction. Mr. Speaker, and then we are told that the chief director at the ministry pleaded for leniency and apologized unreservedly on his own part and on behalf of the ministry for the lapses, and promised that the situation will not recur next time around. And so we should forgive him. Is that a recommendation? Mr. Speaker, that certainly cannot be done. And the committee has done some good job by throwing some light on these improprieties. But, Mr. Speaker, I believe the report falls far short of what is expected of the committee. And I will urge that we take a decision to let the committee go back and look at the content of their own report again and proffer suggestions that would guide this House. Mr. Speaker, I do recollect that on an occasion when we had a report such as this, way back in, I think, 1999 or 2000, thereabouts, we were told that we should form a committee to deal with matters arising out of it. And that, some people thought, was the import of Article 1876. Yeah. Later on, after debating the matter amongst us, we realized that indeed there's much to 1876 than just forming a committee on the spur of the moment to deal with a report from our own committee. So in that regard, Mr. Speaker, recognizing that the report falls short in many areas of their own recommendations, Mr. Speaker, I would plead that we send this report back to the committee. There are very good materials in the committee, and I believe if they do a second reading of their own reports and do serious introspection, they will come to us in a better way with better recommendations, which we would adopt. For now, Mr. Speaker, if we leave it to plenary, plenary may come with various suggestions, and it may become difficult to synthesize those recommendations for plenary. So let us take the report back to the committee for them to have a second look at it. to properly guide this House into taking a very good decision. So, Speaker, that would be my position on it. Thank you very much.
Honourable members, on this matter, I want to hear the minority leadership that the report is not, the question is not put on the report, that it's sent back to the committee to properly advise the House. Yes, Honourable Available Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think the leader raised two issues, one of which is either the report goes back, like you are saying, or we comply with Article 1876, which calls for the establishment of a public interest committee to look into the matter. My other question is, if the report should go back and comes again, is it coming for us to debate it again, and what action? Well, it will come to plenary. Or are we to comply with what 1876 is saying as to whether the formation or the constitutional formation of the public interest committee will be formed to go through this? Well, it might not be the only Auditor General report that we'll be dealing with. And when you read the provision very, very well, it is interested at this stage where the report of the Auditor General has been debated, and the debate takes place in the plenary. The Public Accounts Committee have submitted their report. It has been debated. After the debate, what next? And I believe that is where the Constitution is very important at. My senior colleague, the Deputy Majority Leader, was talking about the Special Prosecutor. The Speaker, there are so many options. But on this particular one, the Constitution has been very emphatic. Are we to form the Public Interest Committee or not? And which is it? So that going forward, when issues like this are coming, they can be referred to that committee to deal with it. Because when I consulted the members of the committee, they said there were other recommendations that are not, I believe, are not in the report. So clearly, it put me in a fix. And as to whether we should form this, if we form this, I think the Public Interest Committee may go further. Is it going to implement the report? What specific recommendations are they making? Or what do we want to achieve at the end of it all? So, Mr. Speaker, I will stand by the position of the Article 1876, just as the Majority Leader was saying. Because that's what the Constitution is calling for. Thank you very much for the question.
Members, I think that we haven't gotten there. It is when we are satisfied with the report that if we decide to take the line suggested by Article 186, then it is every Auditor General's report. But we're dealing with a specific one which we think that the recommendations are not adequate. So I would rather direct that the report goes back with specific instructions, and that's what I'm going to do now. Honourable members, I direct that the committee goes back, sift out the specific public officials who have caused an infraction of any law, and recommend that those public officials, the appropriate sanctions be applied to them in accordance with law. And second, that the auctioneer, in addition to the sanctions recommended, that we should look at what other law he has breached, and the appropriate sanctions be applied. I so direct. Yes, Mr. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, not to derogate from what you have said, I think it's important that I clear the issues that I raised. As you clarified, I said to us that when we wanted to do this some time back, it was pointed out to us that if we establish the committee will be dealing with all reports that come before us. That is why I said that it should not be an on the spur of the moment decision to constitute maybe a special or an ad hoc committee to deal with just one particular matter. But Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Sam George has provided some further information to me, but I told him that unfortunately, because what he told me is not captured in the report. If we should adopt the report, it will not include those observations and recommendations from the committee. Because if we adopt the report, we are adopting the content of this report, minus what he has told me, which is why it's important not in any way to cast doubt on the competence of the people populating the committee. Not at all. I know they can do the right thing. And that is why I said it's better that it comes back. So you sift these recommendations, let them come to us. And then the House then will be positioned. The House then will be positioned to do what is right. We will then be able to do what is right by chronicling what is intended to be done. That is how it should be done. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Yes, what do you want to share?
Way of information. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the committee, we want to express our profound thanks to members for the insightful contributions that have been made. But, Mr. Speaker, it is true that there were issues that came up that may not be contained in the report. But when we look at page 13, 9.1, the committee recommended the suspension of the license of the suspension of the license of the auctioneer, and further also indicated that the Auditor General should also initiate the process to recover the undeserved commissions that he paid to himself, and also ensure that all costs, incidental costs incurred by Mr. Alex Ajay.
Honorable Member for Keta, all these matters have been canvassed. We think that that is not sufficient. Some breaches of the law have occurred. The recommendation must be made in respect of them. Some public officials were negligent or non-compliant of the law. Some recommendations in respect of those. That is why I'm directing that the report comes back to the committee. All that is outstanding, the committee should do that and report back. I'm not putting the question on the report. The decision on the report will be deferred. And so I direct that the report goes back to the committee to recommend other recommendations which we think are amenable from the report. The report has made observations, but the conclusions are not sufficient. So I direct that the committee takes the report back and make the appropriate recommendations. Honorable Majority, are we ready to take motion listed as item number 7?
Mr. Speaker, no. We agreed with the committee that that one will be done tomorrow, or possibly maybe next week. Mr. Speaker, sorry.
In that regard, I am ready to adjourn the House unless there's any other matter.
Mr. Speaker, the announcement to colleagues is that we have been informed by the military establishment that some function is going to be performed tomorrow, which would disturb the House after 12 noon tomorrow. And that will mean that we have to sit earlier than the regular time. Speaker, possibly to sit at 9 a.m. so that by 12 would have adjourned proceedings. That is the announcement that I want to make. Thank you very much.
Very well. Honourable members, on that note, the House is adjourned till Friday, the 26th of January, 2018, at 9 o'clock. Emphasis, 9 o'clock in the forenoon.